All right. Welcome everyone to our small farm conference presentation on California's urban agriculture. We're going to be talking about our California Urban Ag Roadmap that we had published this year, and it focuses on challenges, pathways, and equity for a resilient landscape. With me here, we have Julieta Munoz from Growing Roots, a farm in the Los Angeles area, who is highlighted in our roadmaps. We're really excited to have her here, have her perspective. I'm going to kick us off and talk a little bit about CAF, a little bit about the roadmap, and then as we move through that, Julieta is going to talk a bit about her growing operation. We'll talk about the biggest challenges that urban growers have said that they're facing that we highlight in this roadmap, as well as policy recommendations that we have for legislators towards the end of our roadmap. And then we will have lots of time for questions at the end. You may notice that this is not in a webinar format because we want everyone to be able to come off mute and have a conversation about this. We really want to get some other perspectives of growers who might be experiencing some of these challenges and solutions in urban agriculture across the state. And we'll just have you guys either pop things into the chat as we go, or save some questions for the end, and you can come off mute and ask them, or ask them in the chat, whatever you are most comfortable with. So I'm going to slowly be admitting people as they come as well. So forgive me if I sort of get like a little bit distracted on that end. But let's jump into it. So my name is Keely. I am the Policy and Organizing Manager at the Community Alliance with Family Farmers. I've been with CAF for a little over a year. And before that, as you can see on this slide, I was an urban grower myself. This is my little rooftop farm in Brooklyn, New York. I grew microgreens, salad greens, and hops for some local restaurants, catering companies, breweries, things like that. And now I work primarily on our urban ag policy here at CAF and some of our federal policy stuff. So some of you might have been at our California Agriculture and the new White House session yesterday, which talked a lot about how CAF works within the federal landscape with our partners in DC, the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. And we too are navigating a lot of these funding challenges from the federal government. One of the things that I work on is our cooperative agreement with the Farm Service Agency. So we give micro grants to growers in the Bay Area and LA through that program. We have a fellowship program of which Julieta is a growing urban agriculture fellow. And we have partners for that in LA and the Bay Area, Veggielution, Food Access LA, Los Angeles Food Policy Council, and Agroecology Commons, as well as UCANR. So that is part of the Farm Service Agency funding, and that is hopefully going to continue. We're going to keep our fingers crossed for that. And we also do some micro grants and programming through CDFA here in the state of California to give micro grants out to growers in Sacramento, Riverside, and Fresno areas as well. So we're really excited about building out that program and being able to get some funds to some new growers. And also my daughter Flora is there in the corner in my dad's wheat field. So I'm a several generation down the line farmer, and was really excited to be able to work with other urban growers here in California. So a little bit about CAF. If you don't know, our mission is to build sustainable food and farming systems through policy advocacy, which is something that I work on the policy team, and also on the ground programs. We have a farmer services team, ecological farming. We do a lot of resource development and help farmers do things like organic certification or pest management, just kind of a lot of a variety of programming, which is awesome. And we really take these principles and values and fight for family farmers. We want to keep family farmers on the land. We know that California's, land prices and consolidation of agriculture is really a challenge. And so what we're doing is really using those values to, form that foundation for our programs, our activities, our outreach, and be able to fulfill our mission to keep growers on the land. So we developed this urban ag roadmap. The development of it began in 2022. It was funded by the USDA Office of Urban Agriculture and Innovative Production. And it's based on literature analysis, farmer survey results, in-person listening sessions, and other feedback from regional growers, leaders, organizations, communities from across the state. So really, what is urban agriculture? There's a lot of different definitions out there. For the purposes of this roadmap, we really wanted to outline that it's got a lot of historical roots that are culturally relevant to a lot of different growers, but ultimately it refers to the cultivation, processing, and distribution of agricultural products in cities, in smaller areas, in larger cities. It all can kind of be considered urban agriculture, and the USDA specifically doesn't really define what that means, so that states are able to make that distinction themselves. So it can be in-ground small plots, raised beds, working with different hedgerows or mushroom growing, school gardens, beekeeping, depending on where you are, if you can have chickens and livestock, rooftop farms, which I'm acquainted with, and other sort of innovations. We have a few other definitions in this roadmap that we've outlined. So, what is an urban grower? We decided to use that term to represent the diverse ways that people identify themselves when growing food. And we want that term, to really be inclusive of urban growers, community gardeners, land stewards, educators. There's a whole lot of different sectors that feed into urban agriculture. And another thing to really note in terms of what we want urban agriculture to embody in this report and to understand the different ways that people are growing food is food sovereignty, and making sure that we are highlighting that and knowing that it is an evolving term, and it's really specific to a place or community of people. And so everybody sort of defines food sovereignty differently and what that means to them and their community. So some of this is kind of smaller to see on your screens or in the roadmap, but at the end I'll send where you can find this online so you can read these things a little bit better. Some things in the roadmap I left out of this presentation, but in general, I utilized the design that we have for the roadmap that our partners who designed this did, and they did a beautiful job. So it's kind of hard to read in this format, but I wanted to keep the integrity of the design for purposes of this presentation. So it really starts out by covering, what are the urban ag benefits and impacts? It changes, again, like I said, in different urban settings, different cities. Things are really different based on where they are, but the goal is to build resilient communities and to help people live environmentally sustainable lives, be a conduit for waste management, ecological restoration, nature-based educational experiences, and just really focusing on what agriculture can do for local economies. So there's economic benefits, social benefits, health benefits, and environmental health. To name a few, there's a lot of different ways, but we laid out a few examples of each of these. So what is in this roadmap and how do we use it? We envision it to be a tool to support, promote, and build equitable opportunities for urban ag, to really showcase like what it is to policymakers, to people who are just really unfamiliar with what it looks like on the ground. And we wanted to offer an in-depth view of California specifically, like what are the agriculture, the very unique agriculture footprint of our urban ag spaces. And we did a few different case studies, which next up I'm gonna have Julieta talk a little bit about her operation, but really understanding like how these recommendations can enhance and expand these economies, and showing like what these growers are doing in these different spaces, and highlighting the great impact that they're having on their local food systems. But we also are going to highlight some of the challenges: water access, obviously, land ownership, affordability in general of all of these things, but also access, to capital, and that sort of like barrier to entry for a lot of urban growers, and especially like navigating permitting and regulations and things like that. So we have a few of those highlighted in this, but we also have some recommendations for solutions. So next, I'm going to hand it over to Julieta, and she's going to talk about growing roots.
Thank you, Keely. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Julieta Munoz, and I'm the founder, farmer, and executive director of Growing Roots. We are a nonprofit organization, and we operate a farm, the Growing Roots Garden, at Emerson Middle School. The farm at Emerson, it's 1/8 of an acre, so it's small, it's on campus, and we have a program, the grocery pickups, where we distribute food on Thursdays to the student families. We distribute to about 135 of them, food that we grow on site, and we also source from other community members, or they'll drop off citrus that they have in their yards, or other produce that they're growing, and other local farms to distribute to the student families. So we're located, it's considered an underserved area. A lot of the people in our community are considered low income, and in fact, at Emerson Middle School, over 85% of the students qualify for the free lunch program. So it's really amazing that we have the opportunity to be there and provide fresh local food grown on campus. Actually, there's a lot of the parents and the students, we get the feedback that they're really grateful to have like fresh veggies, especially with like food prices going up. It's really helped a lot of community members kind of balance those costs. In regards to challenges for us, land access has been a challenge. In fact, being at a school district was not my first choice in regards to land, but it was kind of, the route of least resistance. We are looking to have more land so we can grow more food and impact more people, and make more of an impact in our local food system. Another challenge we've had is sourcing funding for our operations, because a lot of our produce we distribute for free or at low cost for our community. We do have to rely on grants and fundraising, so that has been challenging, and also navigating kind of bureaucratic barriers with Pomona Unified School District. But I'll stop there. Keely, do you want me to share about anything else, or?
Sorry, trying to get my mute button. I think we can just save some of the questions that I have for you towards the end, and include whatever other questions might be in the chat, if that works.
Great.
So part of the case study here that Julieta is talking about is the community engagement and accountability aspect of this roadmap. So a lot of our process included, surveys and listening sessions, but it's really to understand that community engagement process and how we are able to best represent the community of urban growers throughout California in this report. So like I said, we have an online survey that we do each year, and this was from 2023 that is in the roadmap. We did do a survey again this year, and I will highlight a couple of differences from the data there. But we're asking, how people identify what type of agricultural operation you are involved with from this list. And it's also showing, that it's a lot of diversity in where people are growing, who they might be growing for. And we tried to represent all of these different buckets. So community gardeners, home gardeners, farmers, land stewards, etc. And so I think that this is a really interesting set of data to show how different the respondents are who took our online survey. We asked what ag issues are most important to respondents, and land access, ecological ag programs, water, financial resources, and the uncertainty of climate change were very high on the list for most people. And we highlighted, again, those top challenges of surveyed urban ag growers and their operations, which are land security, ecological programming, and also just general business support. People who are running ag businesses need them to be successful in order for them to continue and for people to thrive while farming. So we have a couple of priorities that were missing from the list that we highlighted here, like land justice, indigenous food sovereignty, land repatriation, and food and land access is liberation. So we're really glad that people were forthcoming about offering some other insights. The large part of our survey that two pieces I'm going to highlight for you are land and water. So this land piece from 2023, about 60% of survey respondents managed, 1 or 2 acres or less. In 2024, our respondents were slightly different. It was about 16% that manage less than 1 acre, and 27% that are 1 to 5 acres. So we have, 18% of respondents were 6 to 10 acres, and only 13% were 50 acres or above. So again, like a nice spread of people who manage different size operations who responded to our survey. And we also are asking, do you lease, do you own? What sort of institutions or municipalities are owning the land that you currently cultivate. So in those other boxes, we listed out some of the outliers as well. And something to note about our survey this year was that we asked if you lease land, if you are interested in land ownership. And about 45% of people who lease said that they were. 20% said that they were interested in a long-term lease or more just secure access to their land. And 35% said they weren't interested in either. So that gives a little bit of like the uncertainty of the future of growers. They're not entirely, sure what their situation might be in the future as they continue to grow. So again, I said land and water were the two big issues that we pulled out in this roadmap. Water bills are extremely expensive in California, noting that most water bills reach about $500 per month at the height of the growing season. And half of our respondents noted that they're responsible for paying that. So we're showing how people are accessing water, how much does it cost, and who is paying for that if not them. In addition, some of the important issues of concern that people noted in the survey were housing affordability, affordable healthcare, diversity in urban farming, and avoiding gentrification with the introduction of urban agriculture. Additionally, we asked how people identify their urban farming operation practices, and a lot of them are organic, regenerative, sustainable, and agroecological. One part also with CAF being able to we're trying to bridge the gap between urban growers and accessing some government programs, through our cooperative agreement. We asked if growers had benefited from any of these programs. And in our 2024 survey, we broke it out a little bit more, but on this roadmap, we're really highlighting that most people are not really accessing those programs because they don't feel that government programming and urban agriculture, that there's much of a space for that. The other part of community engagement are our listening sessions and our farmer gatherings throughout the state. So each area had a little bit of a different response to what their top issues were. So in Southern California, funding, business development, water access, affordability, land access. In LA specifically, it was land, funding, and technical assistance. Northern California, again, land, water, funding. These are all just sort of these same themes that we're seeing from different areas. They just look slightly different based on, maybe the cost of water, how much land is available, how friendly their city might be to opening, different types of urban ag operations. So we're also highlighting, like I said, the fundamental barriers to urban ag in California. So land access, tenure, security, water limitations, limited funding for programming and resources. So we dig in a little bit to these, have some really good definitions to make the case for what those might look like, and some of the explicit policy measures that can make a difference in a lot of these barriers. So again, we dug in a little bit to land access, tenure, and security. I'll sort of go through these a little bit more quickly, and you can look at this more in depth at the link for our roadmap that I will send. A little bit more of like price per foot for water, municipal and ag water cost comparison, which is really interesting, and some nice graphics about the urban water cycle. For limited funding for resources and programming, we talk a bit about CDFA programs that are available, what sort of financial resources and general business support and training people are interested in, and then what the current regional, state, and federal support of urban agriculture is, because every state might have their own statewide programs, like California does. CDFA is very involved and supportive of urban agriculture. And then federally, things obviously change every few years with the programs that the agencies are able to support or come out with. People are working on these programs, really hard, trying to develop them over a long period of time, and then supporting them also over a long period of time to really showcase the impact that they can have on state and local economies. So aside from all the barriers and the challenges, we also asked people what brings them joy and what is the best part about growing food for your community. So these are a couple of examples that we pulled out for our roadmap. People just really love the community aspect. You know, you have an opportunity to grow food really close to where people live and to share that with them. And it is a beautiful part of the unique urban agriculture landscape. And so we wanted to highlight how people connect with the earth and their community and find joy in farming, because it's really beautiful. Finally, we have some policy recommendations to ensure the future of urban agriculture. And so really it's, you know, how do we help? What do we recommend? We're recommending program reform, accessibility and expansion, improving access to government resources and expanding resources for urban ag training. These are just going to be ways that people can learn from others, and really be able to ensure the longevity of urban agriculture. Another recommendation is land reform, which is no small task and can take and will take probably quite a lot of time. But we are recommending, you know, minimizing displacement, understanding, you know, the changes in urban development, gentrification, large scale, you know, buildings and things just displacing traditional community gardens or growers, to be mindful of that and to try to organize ways for communities to hold on to that land, really. And so it's expanding some of the incentive structures and opportunities for land use models. We highlight a little bit of information about that, increasing access to public lands and conducting significant reforms, such as the Urban Agriculture Incentive Zones program, which is very different and will be different in how it's applicable to different municipalities. And we also really, we need to support sustainable water infrastructure. So we have a couple of different recommendations there and how to support infrastructure grants and subsidies, which for people who are you know, living and breathing water policy, this stuff will be very familiar. And in general, all of these are really going to be impacted by climate change and can impact climate change. So we're talking about climate resilient economies, how we can utilize, you know, agroecological programming through state and local policy to create some of those changes, create some of those mentorship programs, and think about how this will look 10, 20 years down the road, especially as it might be folded into city plans. So we want to build urban agriculture vitality. And how do we do that? We recommend we do that through program reform, accessibility and expansion, improving land access, security and tenure, supporting sustainable water infrastructure for urban ag, and climate resilient economies. So this page just really sums up the last few slides and the things that we've talked about. So what are the roadmap takeaways? As our state and as our communities evolve, we need to keep in mind that we want to preserve access to growing spaces in cities, build capacity for successful enterprises, business support, management, use existing community infrastructure and work within the system, include strategic goals, and secure long-term viability of growing food inside, you know, urban centers. And then have state planning and city planning climate adaptation plans take into account food and food systems and urban agriculture. We also want to integrate migrant communities and diverse food cultures and agricultural knowledge into this in order to be innovative and find new ways to grow food and be in community together. So why do we want to do it? We want to stimulate the local economy, improve climate resilience, contribute to food sovereignty, preserve biodiversity in urban ecosystems, and encourage community engagement. To really, bottom line, foster a thriving urban agricultural landscape, as it is essential to create spaces for community building, We want to articulate the policies that account for these diverse needs of urban growers. And so that's something that CAF is working on. We're always trying to have conversations about how agricultural economies, how growers, how communities are needing to, sort of come together to showcase the benefits that they provide and hopefully, receive support and funding to do those things for their communities. In our roadmap at the end, we have our, works cited, but we also have some definitions that we use throughout the roadmap to talk about how some of these things come together and are, explained to maybe people who aren't as familiar with urban ag and don't live and breathe it all the time. So zoning ordinances, eminent domain, collaborative governance, like working within these different relationships and systems. And then understanding what land access and security really means and who we're trying to serve and what communities throughout the state of California are being most impacted by bad policies, by climate change, and can benefit from a revitalization of urban agriculture within their communities. So that is it for going through the roadmap. We've got a lot of time for a Q&A. If you have questions for Julieta, questions for me, I think I'm gonna stop sharing my screen in just a minute here, but I wanted you guys to get our emails before I stop sharing so that you can reach out with any questions that you might have after the fact. Got a couple of, let's see. Desiree's asking, how do we access the survey? So we do it each year in the fall. So we will be promoting our survey and listening sessions again later this year. Muriel sent a paper, thank you. So yeah, feel free to pop them in the chat and I will read them out. But if anyone has questions, feel free to come off of mute, come on camera if you want, and we can go from there. So Julieta, the first question I think would be for you. If we want to start a community garden at church, do we need to do anything besides just start it? Do you have any specific advice?
Sure. So I actually started at Center Street Community Garden. That was an already existing garden, and I think they were owned by a church. And I've also advised someone on starting their community garden at a church. I would first speak to whoever is the landowner. I think reaching out to the pastor is a good idea, and already having interest from the church community or folks that are willing to help maintain and help you with the project is good kind of before talking to the pastor, because you want to express the need and the benefits. I would also recommend doing like a startup fundraising event for it. But yeah, I would start talking to the pastor and see if there's any areas on the church property where you guys can work.
Can you talk
Did that answer your question? Or?
I think so. If you have a follow-up, Rachel, just pop it in the chat. Julieta, can you talk a little bit about how you became a farmer and like what about farming in Los Angeles or farming in general inspires you?
Sure. So actually, before I wanted to be a farmer for my whole life, I wanted to be a vet. I grew up just really loving animals. And it's kind of a lengthy story, but I think it's important and it's really what got me into urban ag. Um, so yeah, my mom always told me, she was like, hey, if you'll be happy if you do as an adult what you wanted to do as a kid. So this whole time I was like, I can't switch it. I have to be a veterinarian. This is my life calling. I want to be happy. And graduated from high school, got accepted to Cal Poly Pomona for their vet program. But at the time, I didn't know I had to be checking emails. I was like 19. So I got a letter in the mail months later being like, hey, you're no longer accepted. You didn't turn in transcripts, etc. So I ended up going to community college for 3 years. My last class there was ecosystems biology class, and it went kind of half plants, half animals. And I was actually really intrigued by the plants part of the course because, I didn't know that plants had vascular systems and that they react to the environment in similar ways that we do. So, I mean, I knew plants were living, but learning how complex they were was just really opened a whole world for me. So, come to transfer again, my GPA was kind of too low at the time to get into the vet program at Cal Poly. So, I wrote a whole speech. I delivered this speech to different hierarchies at Cal Poly and eventually to the dean. And they were like, hey, you can join our plant science program. And if you take these additional classes, you could still qualify for vet school. And I mean, I was elated, got into plant science, and my first class was a soil science class. And I left that course and I never looked back. So, yeah, just again, learning that soil is its own biosphere and that it's alive and how it supports our societies. Um, yeah, it was like I felt illuminated, like I found this path. And I like to tell that story because it's a reminder for myself that, even when things aren't going your way, it's because something's redirecting you to where you should be. It was thanks to Cal Poly where, I thought industrial agriculture was really fascinating, just in the way that you could really scale up and use math and things to really calculate, specific amounts of fertilizer and things like that. But, it was also sad to learn that's one of our biggest polluters. And, it was thanks to a few professors at Cal Poly that they were like, hey, peasant agriculture, localizing our food system is a great alternative. And so I just decided I want to do urban ag, worked at Spadra Farm at Cal Poly for 3 years, got involved at Center Street Community Garden that I mentioned earlier. And then in 2017, then I decided to fund Growing Roots. Yeah, that's how I got into.
Any follow-up questions on this thread for Julieta? Right. I'm also curious, how does LA's climate, including droughts, heat waves, sometimes total flooding of water when it does come, things like that. Like, how does it impact your farming practices year to year? And does it impact what you grow?
Yeah, it has impacted what we can grow. And I mean, fortunately, in Pomona, we hadn't had like a major disaster. Like we haven't had, floods, and thankfully we escaped the fires narrowly. Um, But in regards to like climate change, I mean, it's like 84 degrees here today. It's February. And over the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years, I think I've noticed it more in pest pressures, especially with like cabbage loopers for brassicas. Just kind of their season is a little longer. So yeah, pests are having more cycles because the climate is more mild. So that has been something to kind of keep in mind. So whereas where I first started, I would maybe leave cauliflowers or broccoli kind of late into the season. I've learned to just kind of remove them, even if just to reduce pest pressures. Um, but yeah, I mean, we use drip irrigation, we use mulches to preserve the water content in the soil, and that has been really helpful.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So one or two challenges that keeps coming up are land access and water. So I'm wondering, personally, I'm very interested in hydroponic farming or gardening. So I'm wondering why not more urban gardeners use hydroponic systems, which would save them land and water, just to mention two
Um,
of many benefits.
yeah, I know for me, I like interacting with the soil, and I think the soil provides more of a buffer in regards to, soil is more forgiving. Like if you don't have fertilizer quantities just right, your soil really acts as a buffer. I like working outside. I like soil. So I think it's more of a preference. But no, if you're into like hydroponics, that's awesome. I think you have to be really precise with hydroponic grows, and I I like having room for error. So
It can also be kind of expensive to grow hydroponically to get all of the equipment for that. It also depends, like if you have a good place for them, if you have a greenhouse or a lot of people will grow like indoors in like a shipping container or something, and that requires a lot of grow lights, which are also expensive. So that can be a barrier to entry.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Can I ask a question as well? Which I'm struggling to form how it is a question, but I also just to respond to the hydroponic thing, I grow on a rooftop and I think I wonder how we could have broaden the discussion to include how to build more rooftop farms, especially in areas where a lot of buildings are going up. And there's many issues that I face being on top of a building. But I guess my question that again, I'm not quite sure how to make it a question, but I've been farming 10 years, 6 years on top of a roof in Berkeley with a for-profit farm. And I've, should have realized this earlier on somehow, but I feel like there really isn't an economic way to make it work. And that's coming from someone. I have built a successful business and I still don't think it's possible. And I wonder about that discussion around finances and how we can be more specific in how we talk about it so that it's not, and it's sad, but I don't think it's possible, at least on a for-profit scale. And then if we're not talking about for-profit, how do we come into solidarity as urban growers so we're not fighting, we're not like all trying to go for the same money?
Mhm.
I don't know, again, like I'm not quite sure how to approach this conversation, but I'm wondering if you have any thoughts.
yeah, I mean, I don't think it necessarily has to be a question. I mean, I definitely like resonate with a lot of the financial piece. So, I mean, the reason I decided to make Growing Roots a nonprofit was one, because most of the urban ags I was visiting at the time were nonprofits. And two, because, I believe that access to local, nutritious, and sustainably grown food is a right and not a privilege. I am part of the community that I want to serve. At the time I was spending a lot of money, like going to Sprouts, going to Whole Foods, but that still included driving outside of my community. So I think, I mean, I don't think food should have been commodified for profit to begin with. So it is challenging because it's hard to make a profit if you're not a big industrial farm. So, yeah, I mean, for us, that's obviously a challenge if most of our produce is donated or low cost. Like, I want to also learn ways to diversify our market and at the same time not exclude our community for getting like premium produce. So I don't know if that looks like a sliding scale or, hitting up more affluent areas and selling at a different price. Or yeah, I'm still trying to figure that out myself. But you know what? We're still here. So somehow. But yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah, it is very challenging. Keely, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, as a former commercial rooftop grower, I feel you. It's difficult because you can't just make a business work by growing food. It like has to be this and this and this. And then sometimes like you still need an off-farm job, which I also had to do. Especially if you want to, pay yourself and pay labor and all of that. It's a very complicated equation. But I think, if you're able to diversify, like Julieta was saying, different marketing streams, but also events tend to make the most money for urban operations, especially where I was in New York City, because people are looking for that community aspect. But that has its own set of challenges when it comes to permits and insurance, which is a whole other thing. But I did put a link in the chat, and it's not necessarily relevant to California, but I wish I would have had this resource and have used it since. But New York City did develop an Office of Urban Agriculture in response to the amount of conversations that were coming to the city council and to the mayor's office. So it is a way, if you're growing in the city and trying to do different innovative ways to grow, to really say like these are the resources that we need, and whether it's in terms of zoning or like a guide for businesses that want to start engaging in this work. So I think in general, like this site is just a good way to show how cities can be involved in the general resource aspect of urban agriculture. And it is obviously, difficult when nonprofits are able to access funding resources and not have the same tax implications as commercial growers. And, we have at CAF given microgrants to urban growers, and it is very competitive. And also, we give a different amount to a commercial grower than a nonprofit because the commercial grower has to pay taxes on that money. And we want to try to like level that playing field a little bit as well. So I think it's just some of those like little nuances in connecting with resource providers, with TA providers, and then other growers to just sort of get like that, to have that conversation to say like, how do we try to navigate some of these things? Like what have your experiences been and your successes and challenges? So I think in general, being able to make that connection, it's not going to be like the catch-all solution, but we're sort of slowly moving the needle. Let's see. Maria Elise made a great point about hydroponics. Cindy's asking, could someone spell out exactly why it's so challenging to make a profit? How much, for example, is the cost of land an issue? How much is property taxes, cost of water, as they are policy issues, pressing cities to include affordable land for growing within city property and to sell water at agricultural rates. It's a great point. Would be enough to solve that profitability problem. Any urban growers on this on this call want to respond to that, or either come off mute or respond in the chat? I know Rebecca did as well.
I guess I just want to say that I still feel like there's this notion that there's a way to make it work. And I just want to say, as a grower I've been farming almost 20 years with my business for 10, hey guys, I don't think there's a way to make it work. I've done everything. So yeah, I could go through what makes it not work, but it doesn't even, it's all of it, you know? I mean, and so for me, what's the answer? I mean, I don't know. I think we have to come up with a different way of going about this. And maybe it's a too like ideological, philosophical of like, we shouldn't have to be selling food for a profit, or in my case, flowers. But in this economic situation, I don't see a way to make it work. And I guess that's where I feel like if we just lay that out as like a, hey guys, this doesn't work, then I don't have to be fighting for like, to try to figure it out. And like, oh yeah, I'm going to do it this year. I'm going to find my secret sauce. So I'm just being very honest in the hopes that it can start a conversation that feels more alive, and like maybe we'll figure something else out. So
Yeah, and I think in response to this question too, I think part of it is changing policy. So whether it's at, the city level to say you can change a city ordinance for any vacant land if someone wants to take that over to grow food, like what kind of tax breaks might they get, what kind of water payment cost might they get, and then it's also, who owns that land, what kind of regulations are in place between a landlord and a lease. It's all something that's not going to be totally state run. And so you have to approach your city council, you have to approach your county commissioners with the issue and possible examples of solutions. And it could take some time, but it would, be able to reap benefits down the road. I know some cities put that kind of stuff into their climate adaptation plans. And it just depends. If they don't see that anyone is interested in growing food, then they're not going to think about it, and they're not going to write it into code or change anything. So a lot of it has to activate at the local level in how you can ask your city to help growers pay for water and address some of these systemic challenges that everyone kind of faces at the same time, but we're doing it in silos. And so we might not be able to see what a solution could be or the other challenges that other growers have had. And so really this is also about like coming together in community to answer those questions of each other and give solutions or like ideas of things that might have worked at your city. Let's see. Any other questions? We have about 15 minutes left. We don't have to take all of that time, but I have a couple more questions for Julieta or, other growers. If you guys think of more things, feel free to, raise a hand or come off mute. Yeah, Cindy.
I had a question higher up that was missed about urban agriculture incentive zones. I'm in LA and I heard a statistic that may very well be wrong. It was just something somebody said that in the entire life of that ordinance or whatever it is in Los Angeles, only 3 farms have ever used it. We're talking over a period of years, which suggests to me that it's not working well here. I'm wondering if it's working well anywhere else, because I know it depends, its success would depend, I presume, on a lot of other issues, like zoning or community support, or I don't even know what those issues even are, but I can see that it would. So I'm wondering if it's been more successful somewhere else, and if anybody's tried to figure out why it works in some places and not others, if that's the case. Or maybe it isn't the case. If it's not working at all, why are we still talking about it? It must be working somewhere.
That's a good question. Maria Elise, are you still here? Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, hi.
Hi, Marie.
Hi, Cindy. I'm freezing in my little studio here. Part of what was going on is when this was written, and I don't know who the authors were, but they didn't take into consideration some very key things. And it's funny because I'd helped to start an urban farm before this happened, and this person was not interested. So there's a couple different things that didn't work for it. And I think it was like under 10 farmers, which was just a pittance, really. When it was first written, and I believe they are revamping it right now, but I'm not up on all that. But I can tell you the problems. There was it had to be, my goodness, what was the size? It had to be a certain size, which was very small. And the incentive was a tax break for 5 years. If you're somebody who's not familiar with agriculture, you're thinking, oh, it's a great, an empty lot sitting filled with trash we can turn into something. The problem was that incentive was not to have to pay taxes for the length of the lease, and the lease, which was essentially free, between the leasee and the landowner, was 5 years. So there's so many things. Number one, 5 years isn't long enough to really do anything. You could not have any infrastructure on the land. So where are you supposed to keep your tools? If you're an LA native like I am, you know that an empty lot might not be in your neighborhood. So you have to figure out how to, getting there if you don't have a car, if you do have a car. I mean, there's parking situations. There's where do you keep your tools? You need light. In the wintertime, you need water. All these things that were without infrastructure, without power, the ability to plug in something, you're not going to make it work. So it was just a really naive, let's fix this and throw it in there and pass it. And I swear sometimes I feel like it was doomed to fail. And maybe, I don't know, I'm getting very cynical with the current administration. I don't think there was any real negative work going into it. I just think it was naivete and people wanting to fix something without really doing their homework. And I from what I understand, it was sunsetting and then they were talking about fixing it. I'm just not up on what that might be. So let's keep our eyes open. I would recommend, maybe before the end of this, we can look it up and see where it is. Maybe this group, or maybe even the group that you're part of, Cindy, with the regenerative and urban ag working group for the LA Food Policy Council, maybe we can be some of the voices that make it more practical. And I'm so sorry to hear what's going on with you at Bloom Farm. I was just looking you up. I remember reading, I think one of your applications last year or the year before. I'm really feeling for you. I'm so sorry. And I'm not up there. You're up north. I wish I could come over and brainstorm with you, but I really do wish you luck about that. I'm so sorry. There you are, Joanna. Sorry about that. I don't know if that's helpful. Was that helpful?
Thanks, Maria Elise. Can always count on Maria Elise. I have a couple questions, and anyone can feel free to jump in, but I'm curious how, since we talked about how urban farms really engage with the community in a different way than, suburban or rural farms might, Julieta or, whoever else might want to jump in on this. How does your farm really engage with the local community, and what role do you think that that plays in improving food access?
Yeah, so we engage with our community through volunteer work days. So we have open volunteer work days once a week for garden and maintenance on Saturdays. They're never more than 2 hours. And our volunteer community, they're really the ones farming. So, whatever we harvest, they get priority. And they also provide input on what kind of crops we grow, what kind of programs we have. And now that's expanded to the community at Emerson Middle School. So through our grocery pickups, we do outreach for the farm. We call the parents, and something we've learned with the parents, I think at first we were like, oh, you know what, we're gonna have the parents at the farm, they're gonna volunteer with us, we're going to engage them. And we quickly found out, because we're in a low income working class area, they don't have time. So they don't have time to be involved. So, we kind of had to shift and be like, okay, our service is just providing low cost, high nutritional food for them. So it's really responding to your community needs, and yeah, just, I guess having the self-reflection that sometimes kind of how you think you're going to help people is not really what they need. So our volunteer community, which is really the heart of our organization, and they've been around since 2020, most of them. It's a very like consistent and committed group. But yeah, it's neighbors, people from nearby cities, it's people that really have that extra time to come work at the farm. That answer the question, or?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about what I've heard you talk about before is expectations of volunteers? I thought that that was really interesting for me as someone who had a hard time like having other people come into my space and let them, take it on as their own. So can you talk a little bit about that, and just knowing like if someone is there to basically be in community, to know that that's going to be their role, like within, your volunteer days, essentially.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, one of the reasons that, and I think this is a strength and it's unique to our organization, is our volunteer commitment and retainment. And one of those, I think the reason it is that way is because I don't expect people to work more than 2 hours. All of our volunteer opportunities are no more than 2 hours a week. And people really come to the farm for different reasons. People really just want to connect. So they're not necessarily coming there for me or even for the farm. They're there because they want to connect, they want to be involved in the food system in some type of way. But and I tell folks, anybody can do all the tasks in a farm. So sometimes I prepare to have like either myself or one person, sometimes 12 people can show up. But yeah, like once you are giving up some of that control when you have volunteers there, because it's for the community. So yeah, people are there to connect. They're there to work at their own pace. And yeah, I think something I've mentioned before is that we grow regeneratively, but that should also be regenerative for you. So you don't want to burn out your volunteers. You don't want to burn out yourself. And sometimes that means kind of being forced to step back and slow down, which we should all embrace, but it can, that can be difficult when you kind of have your own goals and benchmarks that you need to hit. But if it's not for the volunteers, we would not be here. So yeah.
What are some other big lessons that you've learned in the last couple of years, especially starting a lot of your operations during COVID? And what advice would you give someone who's interested in starting urban agriculture, starting their own operation, kind of just looking to get involved?
Yeah, I think kind of talking to the volunteer aspect a little more, definitely like the education piece. Um, just, yeah, if you're gonna have outside people coming into your farm, um, just not assuming people are gonna know how to use everything or when to harvest. So it's yeah, because your community becomes part of your ecosystem as well. You're part of that agro ecosystem, and so is your community. So, just how you have to manage insects to not cause too damage, not cause too much damage. You also have to learn how to educate your community to how to behave on the farm or how to ask questions. Like if we do weeding, it's like if you don't know what it is, just don't pull it or just come to me. It's fine. Just come grab me over there. And just being really open. What was the other part of your question? Sorry.
Yeah, biggest lessons you've learned and what advice you'd give someone interested in urban ag.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest lessons has been just to be flexible to feedback and to what isn't working. Also because I went to Cal Poly and a lot of the lessons were from an industrial agriculture point of view. I've had to do a lot of unlearning, which has been hard for my ego because it's like, I just pride myself. I learn the material, I excel, I get the A, boom. And then you get out in the real world or you talk to other folks that do things differently. And it's kind of like, okay, maybe I need to relearn some things, maybe native plants aren't all weeds and we don't have to spray them. Maybe we don't have to, maybe we can be a little lax with the insects, just, so I've really learned a lot from community and learning more about like indigenous foodways and those relationships with the environment. But yeah, it definitely has taken some relearning, shedding some knowledge that got me my degree and, you know, taking those golden nuggets but also being like, how has this been done for like thousands of years? And, maybe the old Mexican ladies have some wisdom that walk around the garden and, you know, um, really take that in. So, yeah, I think being flexible to redirecting and responding to community needs. And yeah, that's been a big lesson.
Thank you. Got just a couple minutes left. So does anyone have any final burning questions? Any follow-up questions about the urban ag incentive zones? Yeah, Marie-Lise, thank you for the things you've been putting in the chat.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. So I was busy writing, so I hope I didn't miss this. Julieta, have you seen anybody? Has anybody been, God, I don't mean to sound like, Pollyanna here, but has anybody come to the farm and said, you've inspired me and I want to do this? Have you seen anything grow out of, have you seen any blooms from your farm?
You know what? Thank you. Yeah, actually, and it always shocks me when I get that type of feedback, just because I'm in it, and I mean, it's something I want to do like for my community, but it's really something like I need for myself as well. Like, I took a big risk last year leaving my second full-time job to pursue Growing Roots full-time. And, I was just going on savings and passion and faith. And I myself had to rely on the garden. I myself had to rely on community. I myself had to rely on local urban farms. And so it is an impact for folks, and we have had a handful of individuals who have felt inspired and have decided to grow certain things at home or get into mushrooms, or they've gone to other urban ag endeavors. And yeah, I think in my head I tend to kind of minimize the work that I do a little bit just because I'm there. But no, it's always really rewarding to listen to folks that feel inspired, or even students. We have our after school program, and just seeing them like get excited, or even during our food distributions, like seeing students rush to get kale will always shock me, because yeah, that would not have been me at that age. So
Own that. That's fantastic.
Thank you for that question, Marie-Elise.
yeah, that was a good one.
Well, we are at 2:15. We are at time. Thank you all for sticking around to the end of our discussion. You have our emails. We'll pop them in the chat real quick one last time, but any follow-up questions, we'll do our best to answer. I don't have all the answers, but obviously Marie-Elise is a really great resource too, in terms of her work in LA. If you want to throw your email in there too, Marie-Elise, that would be amazing, just so people can reach out if they have follow-up urban ag incentive zone questions. Yeah, thank you all for a great discussion, and take care. Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday. How do we adopt the cow?
I know he's cute, right?
Hi, everybody.
Bye. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.